Greetings, Marsh here, and welcome to episode 364 of my modded Factorio playthrough. In this episode, we are going to work on tier 4 ore mixtures, so we can start making some thorium. Enjoy! So we're getting some research done, which means we have more spots available. I think we've got most of the direct thorium research completed, so now we can find some other stuff. How about let's start working on getting the logistics versions of the warehouses. How is uranium doing? Yeah, you can tell definitely that some of these setups are randomly turning on and off just based on which ones the robots decide to bring the uranium to. And you can kind of get an idea of how hard the setup as a whole is running based on how much of this stack is actually actively creating uranium. So since only the very back end is making it, it means we have a lot of fuel production capacity remaining. Certainly we could easily build more reactors and support them. It's just, why build more plutonium reactors when we could build thorium reactors instead and make use of these byproducts, which are required for burning thorium. It's not that we're just getting rid of byproducts, but we have to use them. So we might as well, since they are available. Those farms are doing an amazing job at keeping it cleaned up outside the walls. So that's great. You can see they are still working very hard. And we can test our work in the sense that we're getting a full belt of input right here, and that's essentially what we base this off of, is just about one belt of input. And this one's a little slower, so it's not going quite as fast. And although we will have our 20 rocket silos, we won't necessarily be using them constantly. We just want to have them available. And finally, we're not using all available drones anymore, so it looks like they have balanced with the resources. And yeah, some zeros, some 99s, all of that is kind of to be expected. It's looking great. And this is going to take a great long while for these two turbines to burn through all of this, but they will eventually. At least this tank is now empty. So we can get rid of at least these extra pipes. It's still kind of a zigzag, but it is what it is. Meanwhile, how is the science bus doing as a whole? Well, we are completely using every single science lab that we have, and it makes sense. That's about 8 or 7.5, and most of these setups have been upgraded to do approximately 8. Not necessarily. Some of them are falling behind, but it takes a long time for them to actually become a problem. So, yeah, we have pretty much tripled the output of the science bus with these upgrades. And it's holding. Wow, that's a lot, but that's just because there's so many machines. But there's not much more we can really do for this setup, short of just fully rebuilding it, because we only have so much room. And that's a small request for silicon nitride. But it also makes sense because it's doing its best to try to keep up. Oh, that's one interesting thing, though, is that there's actually not enough nitrogen for this. I wonder, how much nitrogen is all of this? It might be more than a pipe, and that's the problem. No, it's within a pipe. But it's kind of far away, and there's no pump here. So let's quickly teleport, and let's put a pressure pump in here. Because this is set up when this gets too low, and actually this is the factory's nitrogen, so it makes sense that it would get so low. So that might have just been the problem right there, is it just needed a pressure pump. Yep. They're all good again. Well, that's a lot of power we're generating right now. Running on butane, the burner setup, solar panels, and plutonium. Wow. 11.9 gigawatts. We've reached a new record again. And funnily enough, only 5 gigawatts of that actually went into the accumulators. So that was like 6 or 7 gigawatts of actual factory power that was required right then. Yeah, we're looking at like 3 gigawatts just for science, and 700 megawatts just for those tiles. So yeah, our factory is getting real thirsty here. Well, we got one more spot on the list, which means we can fill it up with the last logistics warehouse there. It probably wouldn't be the worst idea here to get started on the thorium processing now, because this is actually going to be a fairly long process to get all the way up to having running thorium reactors. Because the first thing we need to do is actually acquire the thorium And we've been able to do this for a while now. But the problem is that you just don't get thorium very quickly. Really, the only way we could have done it was from mineral sludge, and we get the smallest % chance of thorium and mostly uranium. So instead, the way that we make thorium is through sorting, and we sort it through both ferrous and cupric crystals. And that is the final tier of our ore mixtures, where the first tier is mixing all the colors together and crushing them. The second one is crushing them further with a milling drum, and the third one was a two-step process. One was turning it into sludge, and then 2 was cleaning it up into dust. But now we have a couple more steps to take it the last bit of the way. And it's actually a 4-step process to do this. So when you really think about it, to go down the entire chain to get to tier 4 with your mixtures, it's an 8-step process. And we've only done 4 of them right now. So the final 4 steps is we take our dust and mix that in with the tier 3 of the regular crystals and sulfuric acid. And that's the same for both cupric and ferrous. And that creates a slurry, which is different than the sludge here. And that slurry goes through a ceramic filter with purified water to get turned into a concentrate, which will make sulfuric wastewater as a result. And then we take that concentrate and add ferric chloride or cupric chloride with the case of the cupric mixture, which I don't know if we've ever done the cupric chloride mixture, to turn it into the anodized concentrate, which will give us a slag and more wastewater. And then finally, we take that concentrate, send it through a crystallizer, and then bam, we get our crystals. And then what do we do with those crystals? Well, we could sort them. And since these crystals go into nothing else besides directly sorting them, it might actually be a pretty smart idea to put these on the bus. We'll have to see. But anyway, like the other setups, with purified ores, it gives you 9 as an output for 9 input. But what you get is a little different. We'll actually start getting chrome as a direct output if we sort the ferrous crystals. And we just get a bunch of other stuff with cupric. But ultimately, as useful as some of that stuff would be, really what we'd be doing all this for is thorium. So it's kind of amazing to look at how far down the chain these ores had to go to actually be turned into thorium. But we would take both of those crystals, mix the hybrid catalyst, and then finally we would get the thorium, and then that would have to go through the thorium processing chain and then have eventually the output of plutonium mixed in with it so we can actually make power with it. So we have a question. How much thorium do we actually need to make? Well, our bus has been designed around 30 items a second, and the output of the bus has been designed around 60. So one thing we can do here is just see what 60 thorium would look like. So our output is thorium. We'll want 60 of them. It can only go through the best machine, and of course we can use productivities. So let's do that with a pollution cleaning in there. So how about let's calculate ferrous first, and we'll unlink it and say we actually want to do 30 a second. And it comes out of a crystallizer, which is funny. But with speed modules, it knocks it down to 1. Because of course it does. Then the concentrate comes out of an electrowinning cell, which of course we have the best versions of. I don't think we've actually used it for anything at this point. The speed modules are not quite as powerful here, because now we need 2 of them. But we could do the equivalent of direct inserting, except with pipes, with that. And it gives us some outputs, but we'll work with that in a bit. The ferrous concentrate is done in a filtration unit. So speed modules makes it 1. And lots of random inputs and outputs, but these are just going to be a bunch of pipes we can all hook together. Then the slurry comes from the leaching plant. And we do need 3 plants for this. But ultimately, 5 of each item is more than reasonable, because all of our setups in general are designed around 30 items a second. So we can easily leach 5 away. Plus it would require 15 of the previous tier. So it's interesting that 15 of the previous tier turns into 30 when it's all said and done. And our previous tiers do give us 30. So that would leave resources left over for sorting on the bus and making this with no other upgrades. Cool, and then we come back out and it says we have an output of crystals, but that's fine because it's not directly linked to that 60. So I would expect to see something like that. We'll do the same here, just say we want 30. And it's essentially the same with the difference of needing the copper chloride instead. And then we back out here. This one is kind of the odd part of this recipe, so we probably don't even really need to have it in here. So we have our two setups that have an immense amount of inputs and outputs. Well, we can clean it up a little bit because these filters are probably going to be cleaned direct insertion right next to their filtration unit. So if we say we want the input of the filter, and that's being taken care of through this machine, and it requires just one machine, which is great because that means an efficiency and a pollution cleaning, and that's it. And does require water, so we'll want to know about that. But we'll do the same thing for this other side, and that removes an item off of both the input and the output, which cleans it up, makes it look a little nicer. One row now. So now we want to look at stuff, and what can we do here? Well, both setups are going to create sulfuric wastewater, and we would of course want to process that here rather than put it on a bus. Lock it to the input, and we'll put a pollution cleaning in there on that plant. The slag can be moved up the bus a little bit to where it would normally get processed, and the mineralized water could be attached to the same pipe. So that covers the outputs. The inputs, of course, all of these crystals would already be available. The dust would be available. The sulfuric acid would be available, but we do need these solutions. Now, I don't think we're doing any of the copper chloride solutions anywhere. Nope. But we are doing ferric chloride, and it's all the way up here in this weird spot because all of that goes into making circuits. And the two recipes are very similar. Hydrogen chloride gas gets mixed in, and then a little bit of copper or a little bit of iron. And it actually makes sense to do that part up here because that's where the ore is going to be. So we can just put it right here, plus the acids have already been delivered. So the only thing we would actually need to send down is a pipe, and it would be kind of awkward because we'd have to essentially do it on the train track. But it could come down just fine. So the only thing we actually have to calculate here is the copper chloride. So we'll do that. It's quite simple. It only needs one machine, so we can make it clean. And then the gases would come from elsewhere, the ores would come from elsewhere. It looks like we would just need to top the setup up with purified water, which we do with a purification plant. And speed modules gets it down to 1. And that's kind of convenient because that's essentially one pipe's worth of fluid. Well, we have two setups that are essentially identical and then some supporting components. So let's design one of them, and then we can copy it, and then we'll figure out where to put it. It'll almost certainly go here somewhere, and you can tell just by these numbers it's going to be way smaller than this. So it will not be an issue at all, which is great. I'm just constantly amazed at the end game machines and how good they are, and that research is going a lot faster now that we've finished up with the thorium stuff. Well, one thing I wanted to do was the artillery turret 3s, and we've already got those done. So while I'm thinking about it, let's do the better laser turrets too. Otherwise, I'm feeling pretty good with the technology that we have. There's certainly some upgrades we can do, like making better plastic. And this would essentially make it so we could use our butane as a plastic input. But I don't know if I want to add that into our current setup, considering how soon that we built it. Maybe when that well runs dry and we have to build it somewhere else, that will be a good opportunity to upgrade it. But I'm feeling pretty good. And in fact, one thing though, that could use up all of that uranium we have is making uranium ammo. And it consumes a huge amount of 238. And it's also a huge research. So sure. But other than that, I'm feeling pretty good that we can start just kind of getting some of this incremental research. And then we'll just hit some of these other resources if it's the kind of thing we need. I mean, certainly we could do better belts. But at this point, going from 60 to 75 items a second is kind of an afterthought. Maybe having the faster inserters would be a little nice. But inserter speed limitations just tends not to be a thing right now. So I feel like we can get to that when we get to it. For now, how about let's get us an extra 5 slots on our inventory. Well, let's go final step at the top, since that's how it would be orientated on the bus. We'll set it with the pipe going down. And then we have the electrowinning cell with 2 inputs and 2 outputs, which is kind of annoying, especially considering it has a belt output as well. Okay, we can try to position this a little nicer, and yeah, how about let's just do that. And it's actually going to have an output of 30 items a second. Well, a stack inserter would do it if it had a purple belt. And that's kind of funny that you have a purple belt going into a red belt. But it makes the inserters go a lot faster. So this silly little thing right here actually puts out 30 items a second onto that belt. So we're going to have some output fluids. Let's remind ourselves that we have them with those little pipes. But we have one input here. And let's, how about line it up right there and have an underground going through there so we can walk through. This does have its input and output. Needs its clean water, which would come from somewhere. And its filters from here. Let's give it some spaces. So we can put some things here. And in fact, we can do a requester chest for the clean filters to make sure that it always has enough. And we have the green assembling machines now. And of course, if purple was good enough, then certainly green is as well. But anyway, it's there. So now this one machine is going to need these two inputs. And this is the one that has all of the requirements. And that basically completes this side. We would need the exact same thing twice. Really, except the only thing that would be different would be the ferric chloride mixture coming into this machine. It does mean that we could essentially double this. Can't really flip it though. So I'm actually going to get rid of our extra pipes. And we can plop this in here somewhere. There's going to be more than enough space, so we don't need to worry about smashing it in or anything like that. And it looks like I mixed up the ferric chloride with water, so these aren't actually connected right here. But they are along down there. Let's get these recipes switched over. And all of those belts will be connected. These ones will not. Okay, we had the contributing components here. One was the water treatment plant handling all of the wastewater here. How about let's just plop it here and then all these pipes can just go in. We need one other plant doing the water purification now. It might help if there's some kind of tank in here. So let's give it a few spaces. Then put a tank in there with a top-up valve to make sure that stays at 80%. And then this whole setup is going to need about 1200 water, which, yes, it's one pipe's worth, but also we have pump jacks too. I think we're good to go. So let's teleport down there. This is a pretty long teleport, but boing, we're there. And just pick a spot for this. There's so much space, it just doesn't matter. And we might want to leave a lot of room for pipes and stuff, so let's do this. I guess we don't really need the water pump jacks, considering we have actual ocean right there, but oh well. So I was in the process of hooking up all of the pipes and belts, and we have a problem. The bus is clogged. And I can pretty much immediately tell what the problem is because we have these chests at the very end to pick up resources that really shouldn't have gotten there, but they did. And it's tungsten. So somehow we went from we don't have enough tungsten to everything is clogged on tungsten. What happened? Let's go over here. Ah, I did not set these to tungsten. So in fact, uranium, if it was being sent here, would have been pulled off. So it's actually possible that uranium has made its way into the tungsten setup somehow. And that's bombonium. That's not right. So that's bad. So we have been essentially constantly crystallizing tungsten, and it has not gotten to where it needed to go. Oops. Well, let's see here. First of all, let's follow tungsten. Well, no uranium got in here. And those are just fuel blocks, which are fine with being there. Although one interesting thing that's worth noting, let's just teleport here, is that these warehouses are getting more and more full. The fact that we built our cobalt setup has not helped getting rid of all this calcium chloride, so that is something we need to solve. But we also need to solve the problem of these resources. And probably the easiest way to solve this, especially now that we have our new logistics warehouses, is to turn these two warehouses at the end into an active provider warehouse. It doesn't help us necessarily because we want these warehouses to be here to pick up extra resources so we see what they are. But in this situation, since we already know what the problem is, just placing these here is probably the easiest way to get this cleared out. Because what robots are going to do is take those resources and drop them right here. And in fact, we need to come here to set this number much higher to 9,600. And how about some stack inserters in there? That is actually going to take a long time to get it fully where it needs to go, but at least production will stop right here for the most part. Well, it's getting removed, but they're taking it to the storage junk warehouse, and not where they need to go. That's kind of odd. I wonder if that's just a weird way of this working. Alright, it's starting to pull a few more of them in here. One thing it might have done is the second we placed these, every single robot in the factory came by to pick stuff up. So now they have to take them all the way up to the junk warehouse here, and then immediately upon dropping it, they're like, oh wait, it goes somewhere else now. That might be what they're doing. But they're certainly starting to pull in all of the ore, which will eventually work. But the bus has cleared out now. We just have a great deal of tungsten now. And we're actually at 11%, 10% for accumulator. It's actually kind of low. Oh, the steam turbines are turning on. Yeah, it looks like they caught it. But it's getting closer and closer to the red line. Yeah, and that kind of makes sense because it looks like we might be close to around 75% duty cycle now for the turbines, at least for plutonium. But they're continuing to run, and I see we're making a little bit of uranium. But alright, problem solved, and it was just running that because the crystallizers were going nuts. And they really shouldn't have worked that hard because after making that much tungsten, tungsten would not have been the lowest resource anymore. It was not including that warehouse on the end, so that is where the issue came from. Well, we have finished construction of all of our newer plasma turrets, and biters aren't attacking as often anymore now that we have pollution under control. We should have some spots left over where we were working on laser turret Mark IV, and now we have Mark V that requires lots of the previous stuff, and now diamonds. Do we have diamonds here? No, we do have them elsewhere. So robots are going to take a terrible path if we don't switch this out for the diamond there. I notice we're missing some of the other gem types. I really don't know if we actually need them, but I don't want to go through every single machine and double check that. So let's just put a drone in each one, just to make sure we have everything. Yeah, that's probably requesting that diamond from really far away, so it might take a second to get here. Switch it to 3, and let's let this get loaded up. I guess we can check on those gases from the science bus. Well, it all equalized. In other words, cleared it all out, which means none of this is required anymore. Hopefully the drones have been handling it just fine on our plastics bus. And yeah, seems like it. We're full of plastic, so nothing is clogged. So it's looking good there. Looks like our robots are quite busy right now, continuing to move all of this tungsten here. And now we're at 50,000. In fact, this might be enough to set off the high-level alarm for tungsten, which would be hilarious. I mean, it's fine. At least now the crystallizers are no longer making tungsten. It looks like it's titanium and zinc. Because we have enough tungsten now. That is manufacturing turrets. And there we go. So the range isn't going to be much more. It starts at 224 for the automatic range, goes to 256, and then 288. So it's certainly longer, but it's not like insanely longer. But nonetheless, it's going to be a lot of shells flying. And laser turrets are good now. So there's no real changes necessary to our setup. Certainly if we're making uranium ammo, which we're working on, we'll have to switch all that out, and that'll take forever. But for now, let's do our upgrade. We already have tier 3 in there for the artillery, so let's do tier 4 laser to tier 5. So the tier 5 of laser is just incrementally better than tier 4, but it's the best we have, so looking good. If we select everything, is it going to do something weird? No, doesn't look like it. We just go up the line, select everybody, and then let the long upgrade process begin. Because it's going to take a while. It would be kind of nice to see the cannons be placed, and then immediately see the biters get hammered on from above. And I think that's what's essentially happening here. So there we go. They load it up. And here it begins. Looking good. Biter evolution's going to go up very quickly, and oh no. They're angry. But the range is longer on a lot of this stuff, so it's also a good test of Rampant and Swarmageddon to make sure that those performance changes actually help. And they seem to, because we're not getting huge drops in FPS now, even though we are getting swarmed constantly. Man, that's got to be a lot of power. Well, it's actually not that bad. It's nowhere, it's not even on the top of the list. Can't even see it. Like, how are they supposed to get through that? They don't. This part right here is death and destruction. You think you got him? Jeez. And they are swarming the best they can anyway. But they basically have no chance of getting in there. I was thinking that research has slowed down, but I don't think it really has. It's just this research is probably a little slower because, yeah, it's 45 seconds. Let's actually do the lab speed research. That should help us get this done a little faster. Oh, and of course, looking at our build here, I did this slightly wrong where we needed to have 3 of these, not 2. But I think that will work just fine. As long as we pile 1 more on each end. And finally, after that explosives request, we've gotten through 1 of our warehouses of extra explosives. So we're working our way down. Okay, most of this stuff is pretty good. But the last part of this setup was the cupric chloride, which we can do right next door here, or even just off to the side. How about we put the machine there so it can be direct inserted. It will take the gas from up there, and then its output will go along here. And we have a couple of choices. We could put it in the middle of the track or add landfill and put it on the side of the track. We have plenty of landfill, so let's do that. The ferric chloride isn't on the pipe bus or anything because it's being sent solely by train. So we'll just come down the way. And sure, how about we borrow this little edge of the bus. Cool, uranium is done. We have to test something in regards to uranium. Can we reverse engineer our existing ammo? Because if we can't, there's kind of no point in replacing all of the existing ammo. So, can we reverse it? Okay, we can. Good to know. So, our regular ammo is a magazine with bullets in it, and the bullet is the projectile cordite and the bullet casing. Can the bullet be redone? It can. That's also good to know. So that means we can break the bullet down to its base components again. And the uranium ammo is the magazine with the bullets in it, so we'll deconstruct the magazine to get the magazine back. And then we can fill those up with the bullets. And then the bullet also uses the cordite and the bullet casing. So really, all we would be doing is taking the projectile out. And now I suppose a question is, can we break the projectile down? We can. Okay. That means that we can replace every bullet in our factory with uranium ammo. So that is something we'll want to get on. But first, we'll want to take a look at our setup here. I think we're pretty close to trying it out. So let's hook up the input solid resources here and see if it works. Well, it won't work entirely because we still need to request our ceramic filters, and hopefully they're on their way. They are. So once they get here, we'll actually be able to test this. Here some of them are. Yeah, it ran very quickly. And we filled up. We just need the rest of the filters. I think we just have one machine silently making them, so it's going to be a little slow to get them. But looks like they did deliver them though. And there are crystals. Not much to see. Won't really be able to stress test it until we're making the thorium. But looking good, and research is happening surprisingly fast. So let's just go down the list. Making the damage of all of our stuff better. Seems good. So laser shooting speed 5 and 6. And how about energy weapon damage, which also helps the plasma turrets? 5 and 6. And I suppose there's one extra tier of inventory that we can do right now, so let's grab that one. And that's the end of this episode. On the next one, we're going to work on making uranium ammo and also the thorium ore that we need for thorium power. Thanks for watching. I'll see you later.